Every religion you've ever heard of makes the same promise, wearing different clothes. You continue, the details change, and the furniture changes, but somebody walks out the other side wearing your name. Spinoza takes that away completely, and he doesn't soften it on the way. Then he writes one sentence that refuses to leave you at nothing. This episode walks you through what he took and what he left, and why what he left probably won't comfort you the way you'd want it to. I'll also tell you where the scholars disagree, because they do, and the disagreement sits exactly on the part you'd most want to be true. Most people meet this idea in a sentence somebody half remembered, and it gets sold as Spinoza's version of heaven. It isn't. It's stranger than that, and colder, and in one specific way it's more useful. He didn't write to comfort anybody, and he said so. He wrote a book he expected almost nobody to finish, and it sat unpublished until after he died, because publishing it would have finished him first. So look at what he thinks you actually are. Start with what he thinks a mind is, not a thing that lives in a body and moves out when the lease ends. He argues the mind is the idea of the body. Whatever your body does, your mind is the awareness of it, the inside of that same event. Tie the two together that tightly, and one consequence follows immediately. When the body stops, the awareness of it stops. And he goes further, because the awareness isn't the only casualty. Memory needs a body, and so does imagination. He says so directly. The mind can imagine nothing and recollect nothing past except while the body endures. So work out what that removes. Your memories go and your face goes, and so does the voice you hear when you think. The person who was afraid of this goes. Which means nobody's left to be relieved, and nobody's left to be disappointed either. No reunion, and nobody waiting. And no corrected version of your life where the people you lost are standing in a doorway. He takes the whole thing. I want to be honest about how that lands. If you've lost somebody, this is the part of Spinoza people quote at you, and it helps nobody. He knows. Keep going anyway. And then, near the end of the Ethics, he writes this: the human mind cannot be absolutely destroyed with the body, but something of it remains which is eternal. Read that again, because it's doing something very strange. He's just spent a whole book dismantling the soul, and here he refuses to end at zero. Something remains, not everything, and not the part you'd pick, but something. For 300 years, people have read that sentence and heard heaven in it. You can see why. It arrives right where a book like this one would put a consolation. So the misreading is forgivable, and it's also the reason almost nobody gets what he actually said. But the propositions around it say memory ends with the body, and that whatever's eternal here has nothing to do with duration. The word he chose does a lot of work. He doesn't write immortality. He writes eternity. Those aren't synonyms, and the swap wasn't an accident. Immortality means you keep going. It's a claim about lasting. Eternity, for him, has nothing to do with lasting at all. So whatever survives you, it isn't surviving in the sense you're picturing. It isn't waiting somewhere for time to pass. Hold that, because it's the hinge the whole thing turns on. Here's the catch, and it's the part that gets left out. Many scholars read what remains as impersonal. Stephen Nadler, who's written about this more carefully than almost anyone, calls it intellectualistic and not very personal. He goes further and calls it a very tenuous conception of personal immortality. His argument is uncomfortable and worth hearing. If what survives is the true understanding a mind managed to acquire, then two people who understood exactly the same things would afterward be indistinguishable. There's nothing in there to tell them apart. No signature and no history. Nothing that could wake up somewhere and recognize itself. So this isn't you continuing. And gee, I want to be as clear about that as I can. This is the one subject where people most want to be told something else, and I should say the reading isn't unanimous. Other scholars push back and argue for something more robust, and the dispute is genuinely open. But nobody serious reads him as promising the thing a funeral promises. The dispute is about how much is left, not about whether you're in it. So take the strongest, honest version. Something remains, and it isn't the part of you that's frightened right now. That part goes. So what does remain, and what good is it? This is where he stops sounding like a theologian and starts sounding like a mathematician. Ask whether the number 7 will still exist next Thursday. The question doesn't fail because 7 is short-lived. It fails because 7 was never in time to begin with. That's what he means by eternal. Not a very long time, but outside the question of time entirely. And he thinks part of your mind already works that way. When you actually understand something and not just remember it, the understanding isn't dated, and it isn't true only on Tuesdays. He calls seeing things that way, seeing them under a certain aspect of eternity, which is a mouthful for something fairly simple. You step out of the story of your life and look at how things follow from each other. And here's the part that changes what death even means. If that's what eternity is, you don't get it later. You're either doing it now or you aren't doing it. Death doesn't hand it to you. Nothing does. That's the sentence I'd underline if I only got one. Every other answer to death puts the good part after the ending. His puts it before unavailable and mostly unclaimed, which is either the most useful thing in the book or the biggest bait and switch in it. So let's put that objection properly, because it deserves better than a wave. You came here afraid of dying. You've been handed a redefinition. Eternity turns out not to mean what you meant by it. Survival turns out not to be survival. And what remains isn't you. That's a consolation prize dressed in Latin. You wanted more time, and you got a lecture about how time was the wrong frame. I think that objection is right about the disappointment and wrong about the swap. Here's why. He isn't redefining the word to get out of the problem. He arrived at eternity from the other direction. It falls out of what he thought understanding actually is, and death arrives downstream of that. The theory wasn't built to make you feel better about dying. It just happens to have a consequence about dying, and he reported it. A man inventing a comfort would have invented a better one. Notice what he doesn't do. He doesn't tell you the fear is irrational. He doesn't tell you to be brave about it. He doesn't say the people you've lost are somewhere. He gives you a small, strange, checkable claim and leaves you to do what you like with it. That restraint is why I trust the rest of him. The Stoics went at death from the opposite end. Memento mori. Remember you'll die. Keep it in front of you and it'll sharpen everything. It's a real practice and it works for a lot of people. Spinoza flatly disagrees, and it's one of the few places where he does. A free man, he writes, thinks of nothing less than of death, and his wisdom is a meditation on life, not on death. That's part 4, proposition 67. He isn't saying ignore it, he's saying dwelling on it doesn't produce anything. Fear of death makes you smaller, and a smaller mind understands less, and understanding less is the actual loss. Both men are looking at the same fact and taking opposite advice from it. That disagreement is worth more than either answer alone. Here's the spine of everything on this channel. Stoicism tells you to accept what you can't control. Spinoza tells you why. You can't control that you'll stop because you were never the kind of thing that could have gone on. What you can do is spend the part you have on the one activity that isn't in time at all. So, back to the promise. Every religion says you continue, and Spinoza says you don't. That's the whole of the bad news, and it's genuinely bad, and I'm not going to dress it up. What he offers instead isn't a consolation, it's a correction about where you were standing. You spent your life picturing eternity as a very long time that starts after the ending. He thought it was a way of seeing that has no ending in it, because it never had a beginning either. And you can do that now imperfectly on a Tuesday afternoon for as long as you're able to. The part of you that understands something truly was never in time. It doesn't survive your death because it was never the kind of thing death applies to. That won't get anybody through a funeral. It isn't supposed to. He wrote almost nothing about grief, and I think that's a real gap in him. But he wrote this, and it's the strangest thing anybody has said about dying. If you've ever lain awake doing the arithmetic on how much of it's left, he's telling you the arithmetic was on the wrong quantity.